Good afternoon, everybody. We have a bigger crowd right now than we had this morning, so I'm going to repeat a little bit what I said this morning. But this is actually our 10th Create Mini Conference. And every year we keep doing just about the same. We have about 100 people. This year we have about 100 people registered as well. So I'm really excited. The Create staff's real excited that we're able to put these on and bring people from across the university together to share what we're doing in STEM education. So I'm really pleased that everybody's here. If you don't know me, I'm Joe Krajik, Director of STEM. We're going to have a couple of opening remarks before we move on to Dr. Malcom. But I'm going to first introduce Dean Jolando Jackson, who's going to address a few words. If you don't know Jolando, this is his second year here at Michigan State, trying to lead great initiatives in the world of education. So, Jolando?
Hello, everyone. I just want to say thank you for not only convening, but having me, Phil Duxbury, come to join and just share in our great appreciation of this work. Earlier this year, we had the pleasure of having Dr. James Moore from the National Science Foundation come, and the reaction he provided was the one that we wanted when we shared with him the footprint from STEM education here at Michigan State. And he said, wow, no other place has a footprint this large, because we have these wonderful collaborations between the College of Education, Natural Science, and we have other colleges on campus. But what makes us even more unique is we've got some residential colleges that most other institutions like this don't have. So we've got some secret weapons working for us that enlarges our footprint to make us have a very much so competitive edge. And efforts like this allows us to begin to align that footprint so that we can strategically advance some ideas not only on campus but beyond, that can put us in a very strong position from a national and international perspective. So on behalf of the College of Education, I just want to share my appreciation of this work. Our college will remain as a committed partner in these efforts and look forward to continuing our work with natural science as well as others on campus to support these efforts. So thank you for coming out, and you have a wonderful speaker coming that's going to deliver a message that will inspire us, and we'll show her what a Spartan's will is as we listen and respond to her challenge that she's going to bring forward to us. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean Jackson. And as Dean Jackson mentioned, CREATE is actually a collaboration between many institutes. And the other partner that we have, close partner, although we also have partners with Lyman Briggs as well as engineering, but the other really strong partner is with the College of Natural Science. So Dean Phil Dixborough is here to talk to us. Unfortunately, to my great sadness, this is his last year as dean, if many of you did not know that. Phil has been a real supporter of the kind of work that you see in this room today, which has really been instrumental in trying to bring about change in how we teach science at the college level, but also at the K-12 level as well. So I've really appreciated working with Phil through the years, and we will certainly miss him not being in that position. So Phil, do you want to say a couple words?
Thank you, Joe. And one thing I want to say from the start is we've come a long way. I joined the physics department as chair, or became chair of the physics department, when Danny Caballero was newly minted there, and Melanie Cooper was one of the key players on campus in the chemistry department, and we didn't have that much more. Joe was already here and getting things rolling, but the culture in my department at that time didn't appreciate disciplinary-based education research. And it took us a long time. It took 5 years, the 5 years during which I was chair of physics, to get the Department of Physics engaged, fully engaged in transforming introductory physics courses. At the same time, Melanie was transforming the introductory courses in chemistry, and Tammy and Diane Ebert-May were doing similar things in biology. In the math department, we have Betty Phillips doing fantastic work at K through 12 education. This is an amazing portfolio of strengths at this campus. And I believe it's really important for us to maintain and continue to strengthen this group, because education, as you all know, is changing rapidly. We have to come to terms with all of the new technologies that are appearing, and we have to understand how those technological changes are going to impact our way of handling different diversities, from racial diversities to gender diversities, and also neurodiversities. And I think we have got an opportunity with AI and emerging technologies, but they're also a threat. And so the people in this room are the ones who should help us understand how to bring all this together to make positive change in education, K through grade, because we have to keep on learning in this modern world. We can't stop learning, so I even have to keep learning, and it gets harder as you go along, but you know, we have to change. So we have to be very adaptive. So I really appreciate this group. It's always wonderful to be here. I think it's making a tremendous impact on campus and across the country. So it's great to be here, and thank you. And welcome to our great speaker. I met Shirley when she gave a talk at the Sea Change Initiative at the AAAS. Always great to hear from her, and I'm really looking forward to what she has to say.
Thank you, Phil. And so now it's my honor to actually introduce Dr. Shirley Malcom. I've actually known Shirley for many years, when I looked a little bit more like you.
No, decades.
What?
Decades.
Decades, that's right, decades. That's what I meant. I look a little bit more like you than I do like me, right? So and she was exceptionally helpful to me when I trying to locate schools and talking to teachers in the Washington, D.C. area. So I've known her for years. I followed her. She has been a crusader, just really trying to blaze for the importance of equity and women in science throughout her entire career. So it's really a real honor to have Shirley here to interact with us. I'm very pleased. Thank you for coming. I know it's not easy, so I'm going to hand the mic over to you. Shirley's going to talk. We'll have questions, and then we'll continue. So thank you very much, Shirley. It's an honor.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. You notice I corrected him. It is decades. And I want to own my longevity. And I'm going to take you a little bit back into my past, because I think that it's important for you to know how I got to be where I am and why I have the passions that I have. Because they don't just kind of pop up, you know. You live these things, and they bring you to a place. I will begin by telling you that I am old, and so you can figure that out. Which means that a lot of the kind of large social movements that affected people who are old affected me. My journey into STEM, into science, actually really relate to the confluence of two things that you might not even think of as coming together. One being the civil rights movement, and the other being the launch of Sputnik, and the focus on science that came about because of the launch of Sputnik. You know, in 1957, when Sputnik was launched, all of a sudden we started having science taught to us on a regular basis. We started having information on the television, on the news, in the newspaper. It was above the fold, because there was this sense that somehow we had slipped. When we weren't paying attention, that the Soviet Union, essentially, which does not exist anymore, it's in pieces. Ukraine, Georgia, Russia. The Soviet Union had gotten ahead of us. It was like we didn't even know we were in a race. But the idea being that somehow we had slipped. And it was more than about the science, it was about the ideology. And we represented as the United States. We saw ourselves as democratic, and the Soviet Union as representing communism. And so this notion that somehow, and I tell people, going into science was a patriotic act. And that might sound a little bit strange now, but quite frankly, that was the kind of fervor that was associated with this. So I want to raise for you that other picture on the other side. That's Bethel Baptist Church. Christmas 1956, the year before, when that's my mother and grandmother's church. And it was bombed. This was before 16th Street, where you know that 4 little girls were killed. Miraculously, even though the bomb was right at the front bedroom of my mother and grandmother's pastor, Reverend Shuttlesworth, no one was killed, miraculously. But I was one of the people who was traumatized, because when you're in bed and getting ready to nod off on Christmas night after having stuffed yourself with everything and opened your presents, and there is this huge boom that shakes the house, you never really stop hearing it. It's in your head. And from time to time, I overreact to loud sounds. But that's where that came from. So you see somebody who kind of like, I'm created, I'm a product of the merging of these movements. Now, I did not know this picture existed until fairly recently, I guess 12 years ago, because it appeared, I discovered it when the day that my first grandson was born. CBS Morning does this thing, Hail and Farewell, the last Sunday that they were on, CBS Sunday Morning, and they showed people who died during the year. In this particular case, they showed pictures from Reverend Shuttlesworth, because he had died that year. And so they showed it, it went by quickly. I had told people ahead of time that that was my grandmother. It is in fact my oops, sorry about that. What did I do? Okay. It is in fact my grandmother. And the reason that I want to point that out, because I kept telling my relatives she has on, that's an aqua headscarf, okay? Now the reason I wanted to tell them that was that this appeared in Spike Lee's 4 Little Girls, but just at a moment. So I wasn't able to capture that. So then we tool along and it's on this particular segment, Sunday morning. And so I found it on YouTube and I stopped it. And guess what? That little face down there in the corner, that's me. That's me at 10 years old. And I raised this because, you know, like being a witness to history of something that is that important and it was important to me, and I think that it's important to all of us about understanding the history of equity and inequity within our country. And sometimes I think we lose focus on that. So that's where I went to elementary school, first started having science at Lewis School. And then I moved over to Carver High School. Carver High School is now an EPA Superfund site. God only knows what I was exposed to because all the dust and the debris from the coke plants that surrounded us would basically come and settle in that particular area. But that's Carver. And this was the year of my graduation, the Children's March in Birmingham. And if you haven't looked at it, you need to refresh your memory. Protest is not a new thing. In this particular case, it was new because it was children who were protesting. And they asked some of the children, do you understand why you're protesting? And they said, yes, we want our freedom. And one of the things that we wanted was a better education than we were receiving, not because of the teachers were wonderful, because they were all the people who were really smart who couldn't do anything else but black teachers teaching black children. That's what we had. But our facilities were horrible in the sense of they didn't provide us with the chemicals that we needed to even do the experiments that were done. The reason I'm telling you this will become clear very shortly, and that is because when I left George Washington Carver High School and graduated, I went to the University of Washington in Seattle. And people keep trying to figure out, how did I get to the University of Washington? I said, by train. Unfortunately, because I get terribly train sick. But at that particular time, you get there the way you get there, right? But it was a major culture shock. Remember, I had lived in segregated communities. I had only lived around other people who were black. I'd only been taught by people who were black. I'd only had been surrounded by the culture, and so I went to Seattle, partly because I had relatives who were out in Seattle. And it looked like a good place. At the time, I wanted to go to medical school. And there were quotas on the women that they accepted into medical school. So, okay, if I go here, they have a medical school, maybe it will be a little bit easier for me to convince somebody that I'm worthy of going into medical school, or blah, blah. I don't know what kind of convoluted thinking that I went through, but it was a major culture shock. And the reason that I want to introduce you to the University of Washington is I wanted to tell you a little bit about what happened when I confronted the science program at the University of Washington. I finished high school with all A's, but then all of a sudden I was thrown into UW. And as I said, I was eager and underprepared. I almost failed my chemistry lab, and I hate to tell you that, okay? But the first quiz was a 9 out of 20. The second quiz was a 7 out of 20. That was not the right direction. So I went to the only graduate student in the whole building, in the whole chemistry program, who was African American, and I said, I'm not dumb. I said, I'm underprepared. It took me so much longer in chemistry lab because I hadn't seen any of this stuff before. I did not know what I was doing. I was flailing and failing. And so I took a while, but I convinced him. And he helped me. The next quiz, I got an 18 out of 20, and he was happier than I was. Because it was a vindication of the fact that he would spend the time, first of all, and that he would believe that maybe I was worth investing in. Right? But besides being almost failing chemistry lab, and you know, if you fail that freshman chemistry, any part of it, the likelihood that you will continue in STEM drops to near zero. And so it was absolutely crucial. I was isolated. I was one of 3 African American women in my dorm of 400. It was a co-ed dorm. And the next year, the sophomore year, I was the only one of 400. The other people around me were perfectly wonderful people, but they understood nothing about my upbringing. I felt like they were so immature because they were focused on things that felt frivolous to me. Given what I had been through, that doesn't surprise me. That I would feel, even though I was younger, that I would feel older. and really much more committed to staying there and trying to do well. I was learning to navigate an undiverse and non-inclusive environment. When I decided I did not want to go to medical school, and I decided that I was going to go to zoology and stay in zoo to get my degree, I was one major out of 800. There were no other African American majors. One guy said he saw me there functioning and seemingly whole and hearty, and he came in. Then there were two of us. All right, but those are the kinds of numbers that we're talking about. And the fact that I am coming from a different culture in a different set of experiences, but I didn't want that to separate me from the students who were around me. I wanted to learn what they were doing and who they were, and to become a part of a kind of a larger, the culture of zoology, as it were, of the department, of the dorm, of the whatever. But the thing that I want to emphasize is this last. The institutional responses to folks like me, none. Or lots of little interventions. And I am afraid that in all too many places, it remains that way. And I'm really afraid that given the anti-DEI movements that are sweeping the states, that it is not that way, it will become that way. And we will return to the bad old days of when folks like me, who might have been eager but underprepared, could find a place. Now, the reason that I spent so much time talking about this history is you need to understand what students who come from these kinds of experiences, how they feel and what they encounter. There's a lack of awareness within the institutions in many cases that something might need to be done, that we might need to find out where these students are coming from. What are their personal stories? What energy, what resilience, whatever are they bringing into this? Growing concern of the need to increase the numbers, not just demographically about who's out there to be educated and who's going to be available to our institutions, but also growing understanding that equity and excellence are inextricably linked, that you have got to be able to have diverse perspectives coming into this, otherwise it's just not going to work. Growing concerns as the numbers increased, but asking for individual rather than institutional responses. And that has continued. And I think that this is something that I developed with a colleague, and you see the date on here, 1991. This notion that what permeated our strategies prior were lots of little bitty programs. A program to do this, a program for women, a program for, okay, so if I'm having a program for women, a program for black students, a program, where do I go? Okay, where does this intersectional me go? And it usually ends up everywhere, because the only way for you to kind of find yourself is to try to navigate through all of these things that are available. And one of the things that we began to understand was that these little isolated programs, often born of individual commitment of people who wanted something different, coming out of their hide for which they are not being recognized by their departments or by their institutions. They get exhausted because things don't change. The needle doesn't really move. They save the few starfish on the beach, but quite frankly, whatever is killing them off just keeps killing them off. And oftentimes soft money, all right, which means you're always raising money to keep doing this stuff, all right. And even in 1991, we recognized something, that most of what was being done to fix the students or the faculty, to fit into, adjust to, or negotiate the existing system. Nobody was asking for us to maybe look at the system. There's no challenge to the structures that currently exist. And it calls for a coherent, coordinated, articulated structural approach to enabling the students and the faculty to be successful. Now, I told you this was in 1881, but it has taken until 2017 for us to try to figure out what we could put in place to achieve that structural reform that we all know is really needed. Now, the reason that I call this course corrections is that we spend a lot of time thinking about what's wrong with a lot of courses and where the courses go wrong. When Seymour Hewitt did their initial talking about leaving, I think that was the first time people kind of called out that maybe it was the courses themselves that were causing the real challenges with regard to the numbers and losing students and having them disappear on you. And so 25 years later, when Talking About Leaving Revisited showed up, I asked Elaine, I said, has anything changed? She says, yeah, there's been significant change. People think differently about coursework, and we have a body of research now. I know the people at Michigan State have contributed a lot to the disciplinary-based education research that is informing a way that we're really thinking about things conceptually difficult questions and things like this. The challenge is it doesn't scale. We don't have enough of it, all right? And so we have courses. We still have faculty who think that it is their responsibility to, what did they say, keep the best and throw away the rest. And this notion of somehow weeding as opposed to cultivating is just not kind of embedded within the overall culture. Incoherent presentations. Now you may think this one is incoherent. The rest of them are worse. Okay, curve grading. Too much material, pitch too high, inappropriately abstract, not contextualized. When we know, for example, that a general mathematics and calculus course, that the engineering students might not do that well in, but if it were contextualized to their work and to the things that they're interested in, you'd get very different kinds of outcomes. So why do we continue to let the math department teach math? I'm just asking. A focus on rote learning, SB rote, not rote learning, and boring delivery. All right, so, but it points to directions that are promising. I raised the issue of one that I was involved in heavily, vision and change, because the biologists were among the worst in terms of too much content. They remain among the worst in terms of too much content. And I could never understand how they would give you a book that was that thick, that in fact expected you to somehow engage with concepts that I had the luxury of 21 years to understand. And yet, we're supposed to give that in freshman biology? Insane. And so coming to grips with the fact that a lot of the things that we had in place just did not make sense, and we had to rethink them. Vision and change was a singular moment in terms of getting a community to really focus, the whole life science community, to really focus and negotiate what made sense, what are the central messages. You don't have to have all of that stuff, but you need the central messages. And then to move on to Levers for Change, where we asked the people in the other fields, what is the status of your area? And how does it compare with, or have you considered the work that has gone into Vision and Change? Is there anything that you can learn from this that will allow us to think differently about other fields and not try to just kill people off in the freshman class? So it isn't just about the courses. It's about the whole curriculum. The idea that I want them to have this and then that and then the other and what have you, and I call it the overstuffed curriculum, not to be confused with the overstuffed couch. But the idea that everybody said, well, they need to know this, and they need to know that, and they need to know the other. But instead of rethinking it in a more integrated way, just add it on, even whether it makes sense or not. So the question is, how do we change these things? And I contend that these elements, that only by thinking systemically can we provide the elements and the incentives to allow us to make these kind of major shifts in the way that we actually do STEM. So it means valuing and recognizing the unique needs and perspectives at the individual level, whoever is the faculty, and whatever they need in order to be supported, at the departmental, and at the college, school or college level. What is it that the college wants you to walk out of here with? What is it that the department needs you to walk out with in order to be able to really understand the overall concepts? So how do you begin to elevate excellent, culturally responsive teaching? Now, the reason that I raise this actually comes way down here. Doing this poorly, you have loss, but you especially have loss from people who come from historically excluded and marginalized communities. But you won't know this unless you disaggregate at a level that will allow you to see who is being lost and where, and begin to understand that really, the research is telling us that really good teaching will keep a lot of these people that you would otherwise lose. The active learning, the role of active learning, being able to close the gap with first generation students, being able to retain more of the students of color and the women students, all of the groups that are basically disadvantaged can begin to thrive under better teaching, culturally responsive teaching, recognizing the individuals as individuals, including what they bring to the perspectives. So that brought me to sea change, brought me all the way back to 2017, where we decided we needed to stand up something that begins to look systemically and begins to enable us to make the kinds of moves that we need to make in terms of promotion and tenure, in terms of what is valued, what is incentivized, how we can support the kind of professional development of the faculty who may not know how to do this work, may not be familiar with this work, but may need help in terms of being able to provide better instruction. So this is a kind of a crazy vision. We didn't invent, we adapted. Our colleagues in the UK stood up a program called the Venus Swan, which was to move gender equality. They had a separate race equality program, but we decided that we couldn't do that in the United States. In the United States, we had to look at the intersectional issues as well. And so that's the reason that we are very different, and we are structured different from our colleagues in the UK. But the other thing that I will say is that we can't do this work without being law attentive. Here in Michigan, as well as in California, you have anti-affirmative action rules that guide your work. And one of the guide that constrain your work, that are guardrails on your work. But one of the things that we have been doing in Sea Change is looking at the extent to which you can utilize the fact that good practice will accomplish the same thing as targeting effort, that you can in fact begin to make the moves that you need to make. So we, in Sea Change, we want institutions to establish establish a commitment to, as we call it, mutually reinforcing cycles of iteration and recognition. We give bronze, silver, and gold awards based on the amount of progress against the plan of action that is put in place by the institution. This is not one size fits all. This means that one size fits one. To go from where you are to where you want to be. Where is your better self, and what is keeping you from going there? To build the capacity of individuals and institutions to take a research-driven, data-informed approach to dismantle structural inequities. You have policies, programs, and practices in place that are barriers to the kind of thing that we're talking about. But you won't know that until you look at the data and you reflect on the data and try to figure out, how did we get here? And can we go in a different way so that we can support a long-term plan of action? That we want to, as I said, provide a law-attentive lens, and we want to build from the context-relevant work the design that fits each institution. Now, is this work hard? Yes. Does it take a long time? Yes. As I keep reminding people, you didn't get here overnight. You're not going to get on here overnight. These are set up like concrete. And every time you question one of them, you know the response that I get, well, we've always done it this way, which is the worst excuse to do something I've ever heard in my life. But that's the kind of thing that you get. And then I had another one where the institution said, well, we don't want to go into Sea Change because it takes too long. How long did you take to get to where you are? It's not going, this work is hard work. This work will sometimes get resistance. This work will sometimes get backlash. But it is the work that needs to be done. If an institution is to be true to its mission to serve all of its students and to support all of its faculty. That's the point that people don't seem to kind of get. This is totally mission critical work. And so I think that this notion of standing up something different, this is not another intervention program. It builds on interventions, okay? It does build on what you learned while you were doing this other stuff. But it asks for the data to show that you've been effective in that other thing. And then the process becomes one of scaling. So it's a very different kind of work. It's not check the box. Our people many of our anti-DEI people complain and say, well, DEI work is check the box. And I tell them, no, it's not. But I hate check the box too, because it gives an institution an out, okay, before the problems are really addressed. And it's not a ranking system. I hate U.S. News and World Report with a passion that I can't even begin to tell you. This is not about competing, this is about collaborating. And it reinforces positively the notion of collaboration. Our other members include the entire University of California system. I think this is one of the few cases of where there is an opportunity for collaboration to be rewarded. you're not competing against each other, you're competing against yourself. Your better self against your not good self. So, and this is not a magic bullet. As I said, this is hard work. So the notion is that we've got to look at many different levels. AAAS runs a program that is top down, that looks at the things like promotion and tenure, things like that we don't look at. We ask the institution to query these things that are the policies that come from the top, that in many cases make it very difficult for the kinds of change activities that are going on in departments. Because if you put in a lot of time to get your course to a point where it's really working for everybody, you could end up untenured, undervalued, out of a job. So you've got to somehow make sure that the system, the changes that are happening at that level, can support the things that are happening bottom up. We have not only institutional award, we have disciplinary award. We have one disciplinary award process that is in place right now, and that's physics and astronomy. And it was put together by the physics and astronomy community. All of the professional societies, AIP, APS, AAPT, the Optical Society, the National Society of Black Physicists, the Hispanic Physicists, all of these different groups came together and they work on it because it has to be reflective of what physics is and what it does. And we're right now receiving a creativity extension from the National Science Foundation to start working in other areas, in other disciplines. And we are hoping that we will be able to find professional societies that are interested in using this. Okay, that should be it. We have a biomedicine component as well. It just works, and you want to talk about complicated. But in any case, this is the last slide. And it is a slide that really talks about faculty work. Faculty work. There's student-centered work. There's disciplinary-centered work. And there's community-centered work. And the community-centered work is really important in a place like Michigan State as a land-grant institution. How do you serve these larger communities? But how do you also do the student-centered work and the disciplinary-centered work in ways where diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility are baked in? And that is the trick that we're going to have to figure out how to do. Because otherwise, I don't think that we can get there from here. So that is how do we make these efforts systemic. And that's done. It should be done. And I thank you. Okay, questions.
Right, questions. So we have plenty of time for questions.
Questions.
So, questions.
I left plenty of time on purpose. Questions? Oh, this is not a shy group. Okay, we're gonna do this Oprah style. Don't worry about it. I'm coming to you. I'm coming to you.
Hello, my name's Jennifer Doherty. I'm in the Lyman Briggs College in the Department of Physiology, and I was wondering, what have you learned from faculty members in departments on how they convince their admins to go for it, to try to get sea change going in their department? Or does it always come from the chairs?
I know. I mean, the major point that I'm trying to do in terms of department work is I want the professions, the societies, the disciplines themselves to stand up this work. Because it is a part of how the discipline needs to think about its future, how it needs to think about who it's going to recruit, what talent is it going to bring. And because of the connection between excellence and equity, allowing you to understand that I don't know how you can get excellent work without incorporating these kinds of concerns. But the other part of it that is really important is that funders are increasingly asking these questions. And I think that can begin to get departments' attention a lot more than our saying that we really need this because we need it. To the extent that funders are starting to ask about these kinds of concerns. But if we look at the demographics, we all ought to be concerned about this. Who is there to come into our programs? And if we are systematically weeding people out, that's for sure not a way to start building a program. So just, the other thing is read the editorial that I did in Science, strengthening the case for DEI. I think it can begin to give you some ideas as to what might resonate with them. Okay, question. Okay, I'm gonna come right on over here.
Well, thank you for coming all the way over from.
Hey, I need to get my steps in.
So my question is kind of from a policy side of things, right? There's always this tension between research at research institutions and teaching, right? So much so that a significant number, probably the majority of folks who continue on to PhD programs are coming from our smaller liberal arts teaching focused colleges where the sort of work that we're proposing here is perhaps easier to implement. But we're losing those institutions by the job loss right now, right? The number of closures of small teaching colleges and universities, particularly those that serve diverse communities and first generation folks, are going away. What do we do?
Okay. What do we do? I think for one thing, we've got to really elevate the value of teaching within those PWIs. Okay, those big research institutions. Now, how do we do that? I think that one thing is that we need to increase demand for that. In many cases, some of our people who are employers, they talk about when they talk about what students are not bringing, they're talking about things where they're not bringing critical thinking skills, they're not bringing overall kind of big level concepts, they're not bringing creativity, they're just basically memorizing this stuff. Now, guess what? Good teaching actually addresses much of that. So the question also is, to what extent is the CFO your friend? If you lose students from your department, you lose headcount from your department. If your people are consistently pushing folks out, that's not good for the bottom line. Now, the institution says, well, if they go over to a different department, we have retained them, but you haven't retained them, all right? And I do think that we need to start understanding that a lot of the programs that we've had to put in place as interventions, they're shadow systems because the main structure does not work. So they cost dollars, a lot more dollars than you would have to spend if your regular program worked. Beginning to understand the impact, a long-term impact from a policy perspective is important. Now, I think about things that way because I've lived in the policy space. As a member of the National Science Board, and I'm willing to confess, past member, is willing to confess, yes, I'm one of the people who have put broader impacts in place. For just that reason, to change the levers about the way that people behave, all right? And also from President Clinton's Committee of Advisors on Science and Technology. But I also serve as the chair of the Finance and Facilities Committee at Board of Regents at Morgan State University. So I'm always looking at the numbers. Where is the money going? What are we spending it on? And in large amounts, we have to spend it on student success. And in these particular cases, because they've often had poor teaching before they came, and so we've got to figure out how are we going to keep them, how are we going to help them move ahead. But a place like Morgan does that a lot better than a place like these major research universities, okay? The major research universities, I don't know that they have the patience for that, but it does affect the budget. It does affect how time gets used. It does affect all of these things that we have to think about in the kind of larger context of a policy structure and the budget structure for our universities. So go talk to the business people. They can tell you how much they are paying for poor performance in other places. If the system itself were held accountable, rather than to put it on the handful of people who are often the folks out there doing DEI work. And I hate to say this, but that is the truth. And it isn't just the people from minoritized populations or the women who are trying to get through physics or whatever. It's a lot of other people, people from rural communities who didn't have these courses available to them. People who are coming from urban communities who did not have broadband availability. People who are veterans who are entering this from a totally different set of perspectives. People who are coming with disabilities and they haven't even been looked at as people who should be educated in this stuff. LGBTQIA communities that have found hostility in some of their classes. There's a lot of people that we discourage. And so the question is, how do we move from discouragement to inclusion, welcoming and belonging? Yes?
So a lot of this, at the heart, there's all the other stuff that needs to be there to support it, but at the heart of this is better teaching. And the one thing I know, having been in the system, is scientists aren't trained to be teachers.
I know.
So I think we need a systemic shift in graduate education, early faculty development, et cetera. Every instructor cannot be reinventing the wheel. We need to be learning from each other. And it wouldn't take so much away from their other stuff if there was a way to systematically support it.
I hear you, and but one of the things I want to point out is, I don't know how many of you know Bob Bull at UCLA. Bob publishes a lot with his students. Did you hear what I said? Bob publishes a lot with his students, and not just his graduate students. So there are models that are out there that include people being able to do this. I don't ask everybody to basically be able to do it, but the place of teaching within instruction within the department, the role that it plays, that is central to talent development. We've got to build that into the way that graduate students are prepared. Because the last thing we want to do is to continue to cycle through bad behavior. And you need to build it in terms of the faculty you hire. I know that people are asked, in some cases, for teaching statements. Need not only teaching statements, but teaching examples. Teaching who? And not just how well do you teach, but who do you see yourself as teaching? For whom do you see yourself teaching well? Okay, that's the other part of that question. Yes.
Hi, Melanie Cooper. I'm in the chemistry department, and I couldn't agree more with everything that's been said. but a lot of this has been said over and
I know.
over and over and over and over and over.
You know I know.
I'm also old too. And decades. But we have in the chemistry department a project funded by AAU to actually
I know that one too. I'm on that advisory committee.
change. Our goal is to change the culture around teaching, and we've been moderately successful. But one of the things that we found was that despite free lunches, the assistant professors, for the most part, were not coming to these collaborative sessions.
Would you?
No, so we, not me, but we interviewed the assistant professors, and, you know, as you might expect, the culture tells them not to do that, not to pay attention to that.
Exactly.
Right? There are materials put out by Michigan State that explicitly tell assistant professors not to worry about their teaching. And we have to do something
She
about
just
that.
gave the best reason for sea change that we've ever need. Because if you are getting messages from the top that you don't have to do something, or that you shouldn't even try to do something, it is because the P&T policies are such that they do not reinforce the importance and value of this, okay? So you cannot, I told Emily this, I said, it's wonderful that these departments are doing this work, but they're gonna get stuck the minute that they try to go up the chain into the university level, because they will be receiving other messages. That's the reason that we really need to think about this, thinking systemically about this. As I said, you're the person who just gave me my best reason.
You're welcome.
Okay, anybody else? I'm gonna make a detour for my water.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have another question down there. But I'm doing a water detour. And in the meantime, I will tell you, Melanie, that you're absolutely on track. And we have said this over and over and over and over again. What's different here is that you get positive recognition for doing the right thing. And that hasn't been an element of any of this. You've just basically been called a sucker. Okay.
Hi, thank you so much. This was very inspiring and interesting. So I am currently a grad student, and so I'm starting to learn about how you said at the bottom of the pyramid, the individual workload. How do you have any advice for grad students who want to try to make structural change or to get into the policy setting in the after, about how to kind of get out of the trap of doing labor individually?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I am hoping, I am talking to your colleagues here about coming into sea change. And if I were you, I would basically hold up my hand and say, I would like to volunteer for a change committee. Or whatever working committee gets put in place, because you've gotta have people who are working on it. Somebody has to look at the data. Somebody has to reflect on the data. Somebody has to look at the research that says what other people might be doing that is more effective. Somebody's gotta do a lot of that work. And change committees don't get too engaged with it. Okay, I don't want you to get sidelined, but get involved in it enough that you understand the forces that are in play. I think that's the important part. And is there anybody else who had a hand up? Otherwise, I will just go and sit and have my water. Okay.
Thank you, like others have thanked you for your work, your lifetime of work, and this talk. The question I've been sitting on, I've been trying to make sense of, is sort of the motive for organizations, institutions to make this change. You talked about, following the money, because many times there needs to be either a profit incentive or a status incentive. And I think the question is, can you actually get people to think, to change their minds? I don't, the question, I was sitting on it and you were like, last question, I was like, that's about formed. So I'm giving you an unformed question.
Let me just say that one of the things that can be used to actually inspire institutions is who else is doing this work. They want to know who's in the community, excuse me. Okay. In this particular case, the entirety of the University of California system, all the institutions are CTH members. And I think that Michigan State can find peers somewhere between Berkeley, UCLA, Irvine, Santa Barbara, etc. That's usually a kind of how do you get somebody to look at something more than in a transitory way. But then the question about how do you change hearts and minds, something I learned from the civil rights movement. And that is, hearts and minds are the last thing to change. Go for changing behavior. It's easier to do that. I know you might not think that it's easier to do, but it is. There are people who never would have done anything about broader impacts except they had to. All right? Their proposal would not be redeemed if they did not. And to realize that they're a lot more competitive if they have a broader impacts that is good. That in fact it will not win it for you, but having a lousy one will lose it for you. Having an understanding that the institution and the department is more competitive in terms of attracting students, attracting donors, attracting a lot of things when people are being successful in it. When it's not known for who it excludes, but for who it includes. So the behavioral change, the things that underlie behavior changes, hearts and minds can follow. And sometimes people, they'll never stop believing what they believe. Remember, there are people who are out there who think that folks like me are inherently inferior. And that's on them. It only becomes my problem if I believe them. And I think that that's the kind of way that we have to start thinking about it. It used to bother me that people say, well, she's only on this committee because she's an affirmative action appointment. It used to bother me. And then I got to the point I really like it. Why? You want to know why? Because they underestimate you. Tell them the danger of underestimating me. Okay, I'm serious about that. And I think that in many cases, that's what we have to do. We have to stop listening to those voices, to the ones that negate, and start listening to the voices that affirm. And I think that, given the fact that I'm 77 years old, I'm still in the same fight that I've been in for my whole life. The question is, how can I be optimistic? I said, easy. Think about the alternative. I have seen changes that I never thought I'd see. It's going to be hard to hold on to them. And I think that's a point that we have to pay attention to. But in my lifetime, I have seen things I thought I'd never do. Remember the pictures that I showed you from Birmingham? What I didn't tell you, but what I will tell you now. I also saw my aunt elected as the first African-American woman on the city council. The same Birmingham with the dogs and the fire hoses. So change is possible, but we have to basically, be the change we want to see? And really embrace the opportunities that we're given to make a difference. So that's why I'm still hauling around the country, trying to talk and recruit people to this kind of positive force in terms of thinking about what is possible. Okay, you want me to shut down now?
It's up to you. If there's another question.
I'll do whatever Joe tells me, up to a point.
We'll take one last question if there's one last.
But I will take another question, last question. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm also a doctoral student, but I've had a long career here at MSU, providing broader impacts. So, thanks for that. I do. It's not perfect, right? But it's a step towards change. I just wondered if you could speak to. You brought up community partners and the importance of them, and I think they get used and abused by the university in our move toward progress. Yet they're absolutely the reason to do the work. So can you just speak a little bit about how to be a good community partner and why that is so important to our work, and how that, like for me, that sits right alongside the importance of teaching, is being in relational good partnership.
Yeah. I have actually been that partner in my community. Okay, I joined the Science Education Advisory Board in our local public schools. And the thing that I found out a couple things. One was that we had more impact when we went to the Board of Education and than the staff did when community people walk in, that we were creating demand for something. You may be providing something, but convincing somebody that it's something that's valued and that the community wants is an important element. But the other thing is the community can protect you in the sense of if somebody wants to cut your program, I'm telling you the truth. Somebody wants to cut your program and all of a sudden people to the community say, no, we depend on this, we need this for this, that, and the other. Now, that's one side of why community partners is important. The other side is you get great ideas from the community. You get innovative ways of thinking about things. You get totally different perspectives on how you ought to package it or what problems they want solved. You know, and that's really powerful and important. But it's all in the service of really helping people think differently about higher education. Right now, I hate to tell you, I see kind of an assault on higher education. People think that we come here and we lose our connections to reality, that we aren't, some of us do, but that we aren't, that we aren't thinking about the need to serve the larger community. Some people think that we're just basically a bunch of woke folks and not realizing the opposite of woke is comatose. So I think that the idea of how do we help people really understand what higher education's role really is. I mean, I am amazed that the same people who would be out growing crops, not realizing the contribution that higher ed has made to crop productivity, to the production and the productivity that we see in American agriculture. I mean, where did they think that came from? The Martians brought it down? No. But we don't necessarily talk about all of the things that higher education contributes into the larger society. But we can get good ideas, we can get volunteers, we can get demand, and we can get a certain amount of protection, all in the same group of people. I mean, where else can you get that kind of payoff?
What are we gonna give in return?
Okay. All right, I'm out of here, I think. Let's move on.
Thank you so much for being here.
Wait. Nobody can hear you, Joe.
Thank you so much for being here. That was a very inspirational talk. I really like the historical perspective. At least it was exciting to me, and I hope it was exciting to everybody else. Shirley will be around for a little bit if you'd like to talk to her individually. We then have another poster session starting at 1:30, and it will continue then till 3 o'clock. So I hope people stick around, and thank you very much for attending our 10th mini conference. It's great for all you to be here.